The music was still playing when he leaned closer to the microphone and laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A comfortable one. He looked straight at me, then slowly turned toward the guests and said, "I guess everyone here should thank her. After all, without her charity work, my daughter-in-law wouldn't be standing here today." A few people chuckled. Then he added, casually, "Though raising someone else's responsibility doesn't make you family. It just makes you helpful." The room reacted before I did. A sharp intake of breath. A few awkward smiles. Someone dropped a fork. I didn't move. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend myself. I watched the way he adjusted his cufflinks. The way he enjoyed the silence he created. The way he assumed I would shrink. Before I tell you what happened next, let me pause for a second. If this story connects with you, if you've ever been overlooked while doing the hardest work, tap like. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from. You don't have to explain anything. Just leave a city or a country. And let me ask you one thing. Have you ever carried someone's entire life on your shoulders and still been treated like you were invisible? My name is Scarlett. I'm in my early 30s. And for most of my life, I've been the one people relied on quietly and dismissed just as quietly. That night, at my sister's wedding, I stood near the edge of the reception hall, holding a glass I hadn't touched. People kept glancing at me, then quickly looking away, like eye contact itself might pull them into something uncomfortable. I didn't blame them. From the outside, I probably looked like a background detail. No partner beside me. No seat at the family table. Just the older sister who helped back then. What they didn't see, what no one ever sees, is how much silence costs. I was the one who woke up early to pack lunches when our parents didn't come home. The one who learned how to sign school forms without asking questions. The one who sat through parent-teacher meetings pretending I was just filling in. I never corrected anyone when they assumed I was just the sister. I never listed what I gave up. I never kept score out loud. When my sister got accepted into college, people praised her discipline. When she graduated, they praised her resilience. When she got engaged, they praised her luck. And every time, I stood behind the camera, smiling, holding everything together. At the wedding, that same pattern followed me into the room. The planners had placed name cards neatly. Families together. Important guests up front. I found my card near the side, close to the service door. No one apologized. No one explained. I didn't ask. The father-in-law did, however, ask questions. Loud ones. Public ones. He asked who paid for my dress. He asked what my role was now that my sister had a new family. He joked about how some people mistake sacrifice for entitlement. Each comment landed softly, like cotton wrapped around a blade. And every time, I responded the same way. I nodded. I smiled. I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I was watching. I noticed how people reacted when he spoke. Who laughed too quickly. Who looked uncomfortable. Who checked their phones instead of meeting my eyes. I noticed how often he said we when talking about generosity. How rarely he said I when talking about responsibility. Most importantly, I noticed how confident he was. Confident that no one would challenge him. Confident that I had no place here beyond gratitude. Confident that the story he was telling would be the only one remembered. That confidence wasn't power. It was carelessness. And carelessness leaves fingerprints. When he raised his glass for the final toast, I could see it clearly now. This wasn't about me. It wasn't even about my sister. It was about control, about defining who mattered and who didn't, in a room full of witnesses. He thought he was humiliating me. What he didn't realize was that he was documenting himself. And I was still standing there, calm, observant, and very aware of the timing. Because when you've spent years holding everything together quietly, you learn something most people never do. You learn when to stay silent. And more importantly, you learn exactly when silence is no longer required. He didn't stop after that night. In fact, something about the wedding seemed to embolden him. Over the next few weeks, there were dinners I was invited to out of politeness, not intention. Conversations where my name was used like a footnote. Stories about my sister's childhood that somehow skipped entire years, as if she had raised herself. And every time, he spoke with the same relaxed authority. The kind that comes from believing no one in the room can challenge you. He liked to explain things. How families should work. How success should be rewarded. How gratitude should look. Once, at a brunch, he laughed and said, "Alina has a very supportive nature. Some people are just born to assist." Everyone smiled. Someone nodded. I stirred my coffee and listened. Because while he was talking, he was also doing something else, something far more useful to me. He was repeating himself. The same phrases. The same claims. The same version of events. And he never noticed who was sitting nearby. Never asked who was listening. Never questioned how carefully his words were landing. That was his mistake. People like him assume silence means agreement. They assume calm means compliance. They mistake patience for powerlessness. I had learned long ago not to correct people who were busy revealing themselves. At home, my sister called me late one night, her voice tight. She didn't repeat his words, but she didn't have to. I could hear the apology underneath everything she said. "I should have said something," she whispered. "I know," I replied. And I meant it. I didn't ask her to choose sides. I didn't ask her to defend me. I didn't ask her for anything at all. That, too, surprised her. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had already stopped seeing this as personal. This wasn't about pride. It wasn't about respect. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about record. About patterns. About the way certain people behave when they think they're untouchable. Every dinner. Every speech. Every offhand remark. They added up. He liked to talk about generosity, especially his own. About how much he had stepped in to help with the wedding. About the favors he'd extended. The doors he'd opened. He never mentioned the contracts. The conditions. The expectations attached to every gift. And he never noticed how often he said these things in front of people who weren't family. Friends of the bride. Colleagues. Community members. Witnesses. There was a moment, small, easy to miss, when I realized how far this would go. We were at a post-wedding gathering, informal, relaxed. Someone asked how my sister and her husband were settling in. Before she could answer, he jumped in. "They're doing well," he said. "Of course, they wouldn't be where they are without us stepping in. Some people start strong, others just support from the sidelines." He looked at me when he said it. Not directly. Just enough. I met his eyes and smiled. And for the first time, he hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. As if something about my expression didn't fit the role he'd assigned me. That was when I knew he thought this story was already finished. That he believed the room had decided who mattered and who didn't. That he assumed my quiet meant I had nothing left to contribute. He was wrong about one thing. I wasn't supporting from the sidelines. I was standing exactly where I needed to be, watching him build the version of himself that would eventually speak louder than I ever could. And while everyone else was listening to what he said, I was paying attention to what it would cost him later. Then came the moment everyone thought I disappeared. It happened quietly, the way real losses usually do. Invitations stopped coming. Messages went unanswered. Family group chats moved on without my name. When my sister called, it was shorter now, careful, measured, like she was walking through a room full of glass. I didn't blame her. Pressure has a way of narrowing people's choices. From the outside, it looked like I had been pushed out naturally. No confrontation. No dramatic fallout. Just a gradual erasing, justified by comfort and convenience. He didn't gloat openly anymore. He didn't have to. At one dinner I wasn't invited to, he raised a glass and said, "Families realign. That's life." Someone told me later. They said it casually, like sharing weather. And that's when the narrative settled. People assumed I had lost. Assumed I had finally understood my place. Assumed silence meant acceptance. Even my sister started saying things like, "Maybe it's better this way, and you don't have to carry everything anymore." She meant well. But what she didn't realize was that from where I was standing, everything had finally become very clear. Because when people think you're defeated, they stop being careful. Emails became more casual. Phone calls more relaxed. Statements more direct. He stopped disguising his words as jokes. In one message, forwarded to me without comment, he referred to me as non-essential. In another, he joked about how some people confuse effort with entitlement. No anger. No emotion. Just assumptions. At the same time, something else shifted. I had more time. More distance. More clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to emergencies or filling gaps. I wasn't translating silence into stability for everyone else. I was watching the whole structure from the outside. And from that distance, patterns sharpen. I noticed how often his name appeared attached to decisions he didn't fully control. How frequently he spoke on behalf of organizations he wasn't officially authorized to represent. How comfortably he made claims that weren't technically true but sounded impressive enough not to be questioned. I noticed how much his reputation depended on repetition. On people believing the same story over and over until it felt solid. There was a week when even I started wondering if I should just let it go. Move on. Stay quiet. Accept the version of events everyone else had. That was the lowest point. Not because I felt humiliated, but because I realized how easy it would be to disappear completely. No one would stop me. No one would ask questions. No one would challenge the rewrite. That's when most people give up. And that's why he was so comfortable. What no one saw during that time, what couldn't be seen, was that my calm hadn't changed. It had deepened. Because when you've truly lost, you don't gain patience. When you've been underestimated, you do. I wasn't scrambling. I wasn't planning revenge late at night. I wasn't replaying conversations. I was organizing facts. Quietly. Legally. Methodically. Everyone else thought the story had ended. They were wrong. It had just reached the part where the noise fades. And the truth starts preparing to speak. There was a reason I didn't correct anyone during those months. A reason I let assumptions harden. Long before the wedding, long before the jokes and the speeches, I had learned something about survival that never leaves you. When you raise someone alone, you don't just manage emotions. You manage systems. Paperwork. Deadlines. Institutions. You learn how authority actually works. And you learn how casually people misuse it. What no one at that wedding knew, what he never bothered to ask, was what I did when I wasn't assisting. I worked in compliance and risk assessment. Not the dramatic kind people imagine. The quiet kind. The kind that reads footnotes. The kind that knows how reputations are built on technicalities and how quickly they collapse when those technicalities are ignored. So when his words started circulating, when his confidence grew louder, I didn't react emotionally. I checked records. Public ones. Board listings. Filings. Recorded statements. I compared what he said publicly to what he was actually authorized to say. And there it was. Small at first. Easy to dismiss if you weren't trained to look for it. He had been representing himself as a senior advisor to a charitable foundation connected to his business. He spoke as if decisions ran through him. As if approvals were his to grant. They weren't. His name appeared nowhere it should have. And more importantly, it appeared where it shouldn't have. Then I remembered something else. At the wedding, during his speech, he had mentioned that same foundation. Had thanked donors. Had implied outcomes that hadn't happened yet. In front of hundreds of people. Including 2 journalists I recognized. And 1 compliance officer from a partner organization. He hadn't just been arrogant. He had been careless on record. That was the hidden advantage. Not leverage over him, but alignment with the truth. From that point on, I moved slowly. I requested transcripts from the venue. Collected recordings people had uploaded publicly. Archived posts before they were edited or deleted. I didn't reach out to him. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't escalate. I let the system do what it always does when fed accurate information. I filed a neutral inquiry. No accusations. No commentary. Just documentation, time-stamped and referenced. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. That's the part most people can't tolerate, the waiting. But patience had raised a child. It could wait out a process. Then emails started circulating. Internal ones. Carefully worded. Clarifying roles. Requesting explanations. His name stopped appearing on event materials. Invitations were revised. He still didn't notice. At a family gathering, he joked again, this time about bureaucratic nonsense slowing real leaders down. People laughed. I didn't. Because I knew exactly which committee had scheduled their next meeting. And I knew how uncomfortable that room was about to become. The day everything shifted, I wasn't even present. I found out the way truth usually arrives, quietly, without ceremony. My sister called me. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She just said, something's happening. And I think it has to do with you. I told her to breathe. I told her to listen. And I told her not to say my name. Because the most powerful reversals don't announce themselves. They let people recognize them too late. In a room full of witnesses. Using their own words. The invitation arrived 3 days later. A formal one. Heavy paper. Neutral language. It wasn't addressed to me alone. It was sent to the entire extended family, along with business associates, board members, donors, and community partners. A celebration dinner, it said. A chance to clarify recent misunderstandings. An opportunity to reaffirm values. The room they chose felt familiar the moment I walked in. Same kind of lighting. Same low stage. Same arrangement of chairs facing forward. Different event. Same confidence. He stood near the front, greeting people, laughing easily. He looked relieved, like someone who believed this was a formality, a reset, a chance to smooth things over. When he saw me, something flickered across his face. Surprise. Then dismissal. He nodded once, politely, as if we were strangers. I took a seat near the aisle. Not front. Not hidden. Exactly where I could see everyone, and be seen without effort. The evening started gently. Speeches about transparency. About alignment. About trust. He was invited to speak early. That was intentional. He stepped up, adjusted the microphone, and smiled the same way he had at the wedding. Relaxed. Certain. He talked about leadership. About initiative. About how some people contribute visibly, while others support quietly behind the scenes. A few heads turned toward me. Then the moderator thanked him, and didn't sit back down. Instead, she asked him to stay. She said there were a few points that needed clarification. Just a few. She referenced the foundation. His role. The statements he had made publicly. She didn't accuse. She asked him to explain. At first, he answered easily. He repeated the same phrases he always did. The same confident language. The same assumptions. Then she read his words back to him. From the wedding. From interviews. From recorded remarks. Side by side with official documentation. The room changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a shift in posture. In attention. In breath. Someone asked why his name appeared on approvals he wasn't authorized to sign. Another asked why donors had been thanked for outcomes that hadn't occurred. A third asked whether he understood the implications of representing authority he didn't have. He laughed once. No one joined him. He tried to reframe it as misunderstanding. As enthusiasm. As harmless exaggeration. But the truth doesn't argue. It waits. The moderator thanked him again, and invited the compliance officer to speak. She didn't look at him when she spoke. She spoke to the room. About accuracy. About accountability. About how trust erodes quietly, until it doesn't exist at all. By the time she finished, he was still standing. But he wasn't in control anymore. The decision was announced calmly. His advisory role was suspended pending review. Public representations were being corrected. Partnerships were being reassessed. No anger. No punishment language. Just consequence. People didn't rush to comfort him. They didn't attack him either. They simply recalculated. As if a weight they hadn't noticed before had been removed. I stood then. Not to speak. Just to leave. That's when he finally said it. Loud enough for the room. Do you even know who I am? I turned. I looked at him for a moment, not with anger, not with pride. With clarity. Yes, I said. So does everyone else now. And I walked out. Behind me, there was no applause. There didn't need to be. Because the most complete reversals don't end with noise. They end with silence that no one rushes to fill. I didn't hear about the aftermath right away. That kind of collapse doesn't spread as gossip at first. It moves through emails, quiet phone calls, revised bios, and careful distancing. Within weeks, his name disappeared from websites. Then from programs. Then from conversations. People didn't ask what happened. They didn't need to. My sister came to see me one evening, alone. No explanations prepared. No defenses rehearsed. She sat across from me and said something simple. I didn't know how much you were carrying. I told her she didn't have to. Because the truth is, I never wanted recognition. I wanted balance. I wanted accuracy. I wanted the story to stop being rewritten around the loudest voice in the room. She told me her father-in-law rarely spoke now. That when he did, it was careful. Smaller. As if every sentence had learned a cost. He hadn't lost everything. He lost the part that mattered to him most, the unchallenged version of himself. And that loss was permanent. I didn't celebrate. I didn't explain. I didn't claim credit. I went back to my life. The same one I'd always had, steady, quiet, intentional. But something had shifted. People listened now. Not because I demanded it, but because they had seen what happens when you ignore the quiet person in the room. I stayed exactly who I was. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't change my posture. I didn't rewrite my past. I simply stopped absorbing disrespect. And here's what I learned. Patience isn't passive. Silence isn't surrender. And power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it waits. It watches. And when the moment arrives, it doesn't need to prove anything. It just lets the truth speak. And walks away unchanged.